Welcome to Uptown Radio. It's Thursday, April 24th. I'm your host, CJ Yang. Today on the show, why thousands of students are leaving New York City public schools.
There's 1 million children in this one system, and you're trying to meet the needs of a hugely vast population, which is really an impossible task.
And now, there's a new way you can get your packages delivered. E-bikes. Instead of using big trucks, the city's trying cargo bikes.
The less energy use, the better, right? The less dirty fuel, the better.
And finally, what is the best solution to help those sleeping on New York City subways?
People who are staying on the subway is because literally they don't want to go to the shelter. And there's a reason why they don't go to the shelter. It's because they're not getting help there.
All this and more coming up.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. 2 federal judges are temporarily blocking the Trump administration's ability to withhold federal funds from public schools that have diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Here's NPR's Janaki Mehta.
The Trump administration had asked school leaders in all 50 states to submit letters certifying their schools wouldn't promote DEI programs. If they refused, the administration said schools would risk losing federal money, including Title I, which is aimed at low-income students around the country. Today was the deadline for state and local leaders to submit responses to the federal government. About a dozen Democratic state leaders refused to sign the document. Others signed on behalf of their local school leaders. In several Republican states did comply with the order. Now, 2 federal judges have ruled against the Trump administration, temporarily preventing the U.S. Department of Education from enforcing the DEI orders it has sent to K-12 schools. Janaki Mehta, NPR News.
NPR's Aswa Khalid is covering the escalating U.S. trade war with China, reporting that Trump may be attempting to reset the dynamic by insisting that talks with Beijing are underway.
The president has said his administration is actively discussing the trade war with China, but China's foreign ministry and commerce ministry deny that claim. They've said there are no talks underway with the U.S. about trade. A reporter asked the president to clarify the contradiction.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. We may reveal it later, but they had meetings this morning, and we've been meeting with China.
The president's comments come as he has subtly softened his tone following stock market turmoil and economic uncertainty over his tariffs. Asma Khalid, NPR News.
The president says he's not happy with Russia after the latest deadly airstrikes on Ukraine's capital. But NPR's Michelle Kellerman tells us Trump stopped short of calling Russia an obstacle to peace.
In an Oval Office meeting with his Norwegian counterpart, Trump said he wasn't happy that in the midst of talking peace, missiles were flying. But he says he still thinks Russia is ready to make some concessions.
Stopping the war, taking the whole country, pretty big concession.
But Russia doesn't even control parts of Ukraine that it claimed to have annexed in the early stages of this war. And European countries don't want to see Russia rewarded for its land grab. Norway's prime minister says he exchanged ideas with Trump on what he calls a complex picture in Ukraine and thanked him for trying to negotiate a ceasefire. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
A federal judge in Washington, D.C. has paused parts of an executive order that critics say could disenfranchise millions of would-be voters. Among its provisions, executive order instructs the Independent Election Assistance Commission to change the national mail voter registration form. This is NPR.
And you're listening on WNYC in New York. I'm Sean Carlson, 72 degrees and 4.
It's day 2 of former Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein's retrial. Weinstein was convicted of rape in 2020. But last year, the New York Court of Appeals overturned his conviction. So Weinstein is back in court. Uptown Radio's Hannah Lorenzo was in the courthouse earlier this morning. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, ZJ.
So, what was the mood like?
Well, it was pretty empty, which surprised me because, as you know, Weinstein was considered a media mogul in Hollywood. You may have heard some of his most famous films like Pulp Fiction and Shakespeare in Love. So when he was convicted 5 years ago, it not only rocked the film industry, but it also sparked the Me Too movement, when women started speaking up about men sexually assaulting them.
So was there at least a lot of press there?
No, but I will say that I did show up pretty early, like 3 hours before the doors were even open to the public, but there were no lines outside. When I finally got in, the courtroom on the 13th floor was also pretty underwhelming. But I was keeping my eye on Arthur Adala, one of Weinstein's attorneys, and he seemed very confident. He was wearing this fancy charcoal plaid suit, blue striped tie, and gold watch, and right before the trial began, he was showing something on his phone and laughing with 3 other men huddled near the front of the courtroom. But I was still waiting for Harvey Weinstein to show up, and when a police officer finally pushed him in his wheelchair, Weinstein just had this blank look on his face.
So back in 2020, Weinstein was convicted of rape and sexual assault and sentenced to 23 years in Rikers Island. He had been found guilty of sexually assaulting former production assistant Miriam Haley and raping actress Jessica Mann. The conviction was overturned, but now he still faces rape and sexual assault charges from the same 2 women, and from a third woman who was just publicly identified, Kaya Sokola. So how did today's proceedings go?
Well, first, prosecutor Shannon Lucy presented the jury with a lot of photographs to try to show how powerful Weinstein was. They showed photos of him with Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, and Queen Elizabeth II. There were also photos of him with other actresses, including Gwyneth Paltrow and Penelope Cruz.
And were any witnesses called?
Well, I want to talk to you about the second witness, Elizabeth Enton. When she walked into the courtroom, the first thing I heard was her high heels clacking super loudly, and she stumbled a bit too. But that didn't stop her from looking super confident. She had her head held high, and when she was sworn in, she said she was certainly going to tell the truth to the courtroom. And the reason Enton was brought in is to testify about being a friend and roommate of Miriam Haley, one of the women accusing Weinstein of sexual assault. Enton said she met Haley in 2005 and became roommates the next year. She remembers that Haley was working on Project Runway, the reality TV show that Weinstein produced.
So what's the strategy in bringing in this kind of witness?
Enton was able to share what it was like to meet Weinstein and what it was like to see Haley and Weinstein together. During an event, Enton described for the jury how Weinstein went up to Haley, put his arm around her, pulled her in, and said, "This is the sexiest woman I know." And then Enton noticed that Haley looked uncomfortable. The defense objected at that point, and that was a pattern this morning. When the prosecutor, Shannon Lucy, would ask Enton to describe what Haley looked like or told her, the defense came right in with objections, including hearsay. But it wasn't enough to stop Enton describing a call she got from Haley while she was at work, and later a conversation they had in their apartment. She described Haley as seeming shaken and anxious and said she wasn't making eye contact with her. Then she said Haley told her that Weinstein forcibly put his mouth on her vagina without her consent. And it's worth noting that this was the first time this morning that I saw a visible reaction from Weinstein. He was slightly shaking his head, like he was disagreeing with what she said. Enton said Haley became more closed off since that day.
Weinstein moved from Rikers Island to Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan because of his severe health conditions. And that's where he is staying for now for the duration of the retrial. Hannah Lorenzo, thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
The New York City public school system is the largest in the country, serving nearly 1 million students. But that number has declined by about 10% since the pandemic. As Caroline McCarthy reports, the Department of Education recently polled families to find out why.
In a first-of-its-kind exit survey, parents mentioned many reasons for taking their children out of New York City schools, including safety, cost of living, inadequate facilities, but nearly half of those polled said they were seeking more rigorous education someplace else. Jennifer has a second grader at PS 24. She's asked not to use her last name since her child is still attending the school. She says, starting in the third grade, students are required to take standardized state tests, and she's concerned that the demands of testing will impact work in the classroom.
There's just so much focus on test preparation, and there's a lot of seat work and computer work to prep them for this state test. I feel that's like an exclusion of learning, and so that's a big concern for me. Developmentally, I feel that they're pushing kids where they shouldn't be, and I think it backfires because kids should be playing in kindergarten, but because, again, the demands, the state tests, they feel like they want to get kids going sooner, and that isn't necessarily better educationally.
Families are allowed to opt out of taking the standardized tests, but that doesn't fix the curriculum. David Bloomfield is an education leadership professor at Brooklyn College and the CUNY Graduate Center. He agrees that testing has an impact on curriculum, But he says that tests can also help improve the quality of a school overall.
The test regime is a huge obstacle, I think, to a better education. We're in a system of choice. So high test scores is a marketing tool for higher performing students to choose that school. But the testing regime is there for a supposedly more rigorous curriculum. So it's kind of an odd paradox that parents would be critical of teaching to the test while at the same time wanting a more rigorous curriculum.
Bloomfield says that New York City schools have addressed concerns by implementing new phonics and math curriculum, but that their impact has been limited in part by the effects of the pandemic.
It may be that it's less the curriculum and more that post-pandemic, I think that teachers have been particularly solicitous of students. I think in some ways that has meant that students are able to get away with less than full effort in their work because the teachers aren't demanding full work.
Jennifer doesn't blame the teachers, but she does recognize the challenge of properly educating children in large class sizes.
My child's in second grade and there are 32 children in his class. And so, it's crowded in that room. And even though there's a move to lower class size, New York City public school is huge and it's very slow. And even though, our school got a grant to lower class sizes and hire more teachers, physically, there's no space. There's 1 million children in this one system. And you're trying to meet the needs of a hugely vast population, which is really an impossible task.
Recently, Jennifer decided to move her child to a private school in Westchester, where the class size will be just 17 students with 2 available teachers. The family will continue to live in Brooklyn, and that will make transportation a challenge. Still, she feels it's worth it for her child to start 3rd grade in the new school. And for Bloomfield, he hopes students leaving the school system will prompt change at an administrative and classroom level.
I think it's a wake-up call to the school system that they have to do a better job, not only in terms of messaging and reputation, but at the classroom level, making sure that there are high expectations, delivering a adequate, if not whatever, rigorous curriculum means.
Caroline McCarthy, Columbia Radio News.
This week, Catholics and followers of Pope Francis mourn his passing in churches around New York City. Meanwhile, 135 cardinals are gathering at the Vatican for a conclave meeting that will elect a new pope. Kevin Ahern is a professor of religious studies at Manhattan College. He says that even as New York Catholics are united in their mourning, they remain a uniquely diverse group in their ethnicities, affiliations, and hopes for the future.
Catholicism in New York is shaped by different immigration patterns. There are, on any given Sunday, Catholic masses in dozens of languages in New York City that are happening. The other question is diversities in terms of generations. There are more Catholics that might identify themselves as conservative, others who might identify themselves as liberal. People have different priority issues. Some are more traditionalists and want to hold on to more traditionalist ideas of what Christianity and Catholicism are. Or others be more progressive and be looking to push agendas on issues around LGBTQ, women inclusion in the Catholic Church, those sorts of things. So there's a lot of diversity in the New York City Catholicism, just like there is in the worldwide Catholicism.
According to what people would stereotypically believe, Catholicism is about conservatism, but New York City is a liberal city. So how do you think Catholicism and New York City work well together?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and I think it's an important one in this current moment. In New York City, you will have groups that will be involved in immigration reform, right? So the Catholic Church in New York is one of, if it's not the largest supporter and provider of services to migrants and refugees, it's in the top 2 or 3, but I think it is still the largest provider of services. And so one of the interesting things about New York is this sort of diversity that we have. But that, of course, presents some problems in that You can have groups that don't talk to each other. You can have polarizations within communities, and then you can have people who just don't feel like they fit in anywhere.
Now we are going to have a new pope. Many are predicting that we are probably having a more conservative pope in the next few years. So what do you think a possibly conservative pope would mean to New York City?
I don't think we'll necessarily have a conservative pope. Given that Pope Francis appointed the majority of the cardinals that are of voting age in the 135, and I think there'll be 133 are expected to be present in Rome. And given that Pope Francis has tried to prioritize appointing bishops and cardinals from outside of Europe and North America in places as far away as in South Pacific Islands and in places in Africa and other places that haven't had cardinals traditionally before, I think that creates a different kind of playing field. So on some issues like economic justice issues, the Pope might be very liberal. But some places, maybe on issues of women, might be more conservative than Pope Francis was.
So one last brief question is that you've said that the possibility of American Pope is slim. What is the reason behind that?
I think just global politics, right, is interesting. I think there are lots of politics here. Yeah, I think that the political landscape in the world does not necessarily favor Americans at the moment, although it could be a countercultural statement depending on who is selected. But it wouldn't be surprising to me if this Pope Francis who just passed, who is a pope of surprises. And as we prepare to say goodbye to this man who meant so much to so many people, I could imagine there will be some last surprises in store for us as we go forward. I won't be surprised if there's some more surprises in the next few weeks.
Thank you, Kevin Ahern, for being here. Kevin Ahern, Professor of Religious Studies at Manhattan College. This week, the Department of Transportation cut the ribbon on a micro-hub for deliveries on the Upper West Side. Delivery trucks will drop off packages at the hub. From there, e-bikes will take those packages to their final destination. Hannah Weaver reports on the promises and potential drawbacks of the city's plan.
It's a busy morning on Amsterdam Avenue. Big delivery trucks, taxis, and cars rush by. But pretty soon, a different kind of vehicle will be in the mix. A shiny, three-wheeled e-cargo bike with a white metal trailer nestled between the back two wheels. They'll be whizzing in and out of a delivery hub that will officially open here next month. City officials promise the plan will cut emissions in the neighborhood. Nina Tager has lived here for 30 years. She's thrilled by the idea.
Are you kidding? The less energy use, the better, right? The less dirty fuel, the better.
Other residents I talked to are also excited, but there's a catch, which I asked Tager about. They do go in the bike lane. Does that change anything for you?
You know, I've been riding these bikes for such a long time, and I feel like it's when you're on a computer game and there's like things coming across your, vision and you have to get around them and everything. So I'm sort of like used to it.
Tager may be used to it, but for some cyclists, the city's bike lanes can be chaotic, crowded, and there aren't enough of them. The hub here is part of a new pilot program that will be expanding to Brooklyn soon. With tensions high, I wanted to check in with all the parties involved about the pluses and minuses. First, the people making the bikes. Ben Morris is the founder of Coaster Cycles, which makes the bikes used here at the hub between 72nd and 86th Street.
All right, do you want the crude truth?
Morris says the crude truth is that businesses tend to focus more on money than the environment. Another plus is that e-bike delivery costs less than traditional truck delivery.
Most all of the major companies out there have come out with some sort of sustainability pledge or mandate across their fleets of like what they're trying to do. The reality is they're not going to embrace these types of vehicles if it costs them more money to deliver versus their traditional vehicles they do with today.
Academic research from Europe shows e-bike delivery is cheaper, especially in dense urban areas like New York. That's because costs for manufacturing, maintenance, insurance, and even parking tickets all add up for gas delivery trucks. Another plus is the environmental benefit and less congested streets for New Yorkers. That's according to Alex Heil, an environmental economist.
E-bikes, cargo bikes, some version thereof seems to me like a fairly sensible way to both manage the transportation operations, i.e. congestion, and also some of the environmental impacts.
Yeah, what would that look like? Give me an example.
Yeah, no, fewer trucks on the road, less delays, less trucks just idling, blocking bike lanes. I mean, it's just the convenience of everyday life would be improved.
But there are potential downsides. And one is that these bikes can be pretty big. The largest models look more like a truck than a bike. Here's Heil again.
I noticed some of the critics have sort of said, oh, these bikes are too big, they travel too fast, right? They take up too much space. Yeah, those are all fair points. I think the city has tried to respond by limiting the size of these bikes, limit the speed.
Last March, the DOT created rules saying that e-cargo bikes can be up to 4 feet wide, which is exactly the width of some bike lanes. Despite the concern of clogged lanes, Heil thinks the city's size limits are also enough. Starting next month, you can see for yourself if these e-bike deliveries are a help or a hindrance. Hannah Weaver, Columbia Radio News.
You're listening to Uptown Radio. There's more to come. Stay with us. You're listening to Uptown Radio. I'm ZJ Young. Coming up, some people are sleeping on the subways because they feel homeless shelters aren't doing enough.
You bring soda in there, food in there. They treat you like jail. They let you lose your bed if you don't go in there.
And the city is also trying to figure out how to improve helicopter noise and safety following a recent deadly crash into the Hudson River. Later in the show, a personal story about what it means to lead a successful life. These stories coming up. But first, the news.
For Columbia Radio News, I'm Joya Ma. A 19-year-old suspect, Joseph Klein, was arrested earlier today in connection with wildfires burning in Ocean County, New Jersey. Klein is accused of starting a bonfire on wooden pallets inside a wilderness area and then leaving without fully extinguishing it. The New Jersey Forest Fire Service says it continues to make progress in stopping wildfires. The service says the fire is now 50% contained. The fire started on Tuesday morning, and it has burned roughly 15,000 acres as of today. This could be the state's biggest wildfire since 2007. And smoke from the wildfires has drifted into Manhattan. New York's Department of Environmental Conservation has issued an air quality advisory for the 5 boroughs: Long Island, Westchester, and Rockland counties. We're advised to limit strenuous outdoor activities. New York City lawmakers scheduled to vote today on several bills that aim to limit use of helicopters in the city. That is a response to the flight crash which happened on the Hudson River 2 weeks ago. Our day reporter Una Melican will provide more details on that. 4 British families, along with other families from the United States and Canada, protested outside the Meta office located in the East Village. They believe social media harmed their children's mental health, and that some even were driven to suicide. Meta responded and shared its goal of keeping teens safe online, having recently introduced teen accounts with enhanced protections. Parents say that they want Meta to create an easier and more accessible reporting system and to help children using the platform correctly identify dangerous online situations. For all the working parents out there, today is the 33rd annual Bring a Kid to Work Day. The event began right here in New York City back in 1992. Parents invite their children to step into their professional working world for a day. It's a chance for kids to see what their parents do beyond school drop-offs and dinner time, giving them a behind-the-scenes look at adult life. The theme for this year is For New Generation. It's a super sunny day with high of today of 77 and a low of 53 degrees. However, be cautious as the air quality is low. Drama, Columbia Radio News.
Over 3 million people ride the New York City subway daily. But how safe do they feel using the system? In the past decade, the number of violent crimes in the subway has nearly doubled. So how can the city most effectively reduce crime and make riders feel more comfortable on the subways? Flora Warshaw reports on one potential solution, shelter reform.
David Kennedy is a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. He says statistics do reflect an increase in violent crime on the subway system, but he says it's an overall lack of civility, such as sleeping on the trains, playing loud music, even open drug use, that contribute to the sense that the system isn't safe.
I think that sense of order is much diminished. I think that's really different than either that serious assaults are up or that the likelihood that you will be subjected to a serious assault is still vanishingly rare. I think it's that larger sense of order and civility that's really at issue here.
According to last year's homeless outreach population estimate, approximately 2,000 people live in the NYC subway system. And research indicates the majority of frequent subway offenders were homeless or had a history of mental illness. In January, Governor Hochul deployed 300 additional police officers to monitor the subway. Michael Feliciano is a manager at Fountain House, a national mental health nonprofit. He says just adding more police isn't the best way to reduce crime on the subways.
All this money going into the NYPD makes no sense at all. All of this is politics. And it's the perception of public safety is that, we need to add more cops to curtail people from committing violence because they'll see cops.
He says the additional police are just a band-aid on a larger problem. That homeless seek refuge on the subways because they don't like the city shelters and have few other options.
People who are staying on the subway is because literally they don't want to go to the shelter. And there's a reason why they don't go to the shelter. It's because they're not getting help there.
Aisha Tomate is sitting in Times Square. She's been in and out of the city shelter system for many years. Now she's glad to be in transitional housing and out of the shelters.
They don't let you bring soda in there, food in there. They treat you like jail. They let you lose your bed if you don't go in there.
Feliciano says that getting people off the streets is about more than just a bed for the night. It's about providing resources to make a more lasting life change.
Because many of the barriers are like everyday things that people have, whether it's like an ID, birth certificate, social security card, things like that.
The city has expanded homeless outreach on the subway, providing supportive housing and psychiatric services. And the state's Safe Options Support Initiative has already transitioned nearly 850 unhoused individuals into permanent housing. Feliciano sees this as a step in the right direction, but he says a lot more needs to be done. Every day, his organisation Fountain House operates a recharge station, a kiosk in Times Square to connect homeless with needed services. Today, David Ryans is at the counter, pouring 3 cups of coffee. He himself suffered from mental illness and sought help from Fountain House. Now he works at the recharge station.
Most of our clients at the recharge station are generally in some state of homelessness. We are here to basically help them have free coffee, free cocoa, and hopefully make their day brighter.
Feliciano says the recharge station can function as a safe space for homeless people.
And a lot of the times people aren't ready to talk about what's going on, but at least we get to know them, we chip away. If they feel comfortable enough, after the 6th time of being here, he might actually be like, you know what, this is what's going on right now.
And Feliciano says if the needs of homeless individuals on the subway system can be addressed, it could make the system feel safer for all riders. Flora Warshaw, Columbia Radio News.
It's a big day for helicopter legislation in New York. City Council is considering 4 different proposals on helicopters. This comes 2 weeks after a fatal crash on the Hudson that killed 6 people. Una Milliken has more on the proposals.
It's a sunny day, and Kamal Haruna is walking a few blocks from the water in the West 60s. He lives nearby, and he says helicopter flights along the Hudson River are disruptive.
But sometimes you want to go sit by the water and relax, and you see like it's horrible.
Haruna doesn't like loud flights along the water. But there are roughly 30,000 tourism flights that originate from Manhattan's downtown each year. And some fly over the river.
Like that kind of sound constantly, and you don't need it. Sometimes after a long day, you want to relax, you want to repose.
Helicopter complaints have skyrocketed in the past couple of years. That's according to 311 data compiled by Business Insider. In 2019, the city received more than 3,000 noise complaints about helicopters. Last year, more than 20,000. City Council Majority Leader Amanda Farias is trying to solve this problem. She's proposed legislation which requires more robust noise standards for non-essential flights over New York City. Essentially, if her bill becomes law, helicopters wouldn't be able to fly unless they meet Federal Aviation Administration noise requirements. Nearby, Mike Crook is walking his dog next to West End Park. He lives off the West Side Highway. He says sometimes the noise is just an inconvenience, but other times it can be relentless. Especially sound from military aircraft, which aren't covered by Farias's bill.
You can't speak. We couldn't have this conversation now if we were on the river and one went. We'd have to stop.
The legislation to combat helicopter noise is not the only helicopter-related topic of discussion downtown in City Hall today. Councilmember Gail Brewer sponsored a resolution to ban all non-essential helicopter travel over New York City. And Councilmember Jim Gennaro proposed a noise tax on non-essential helicopters and seaplane flights. Back uptown on the West Side Highway, helicopters are flying up and down the Hudson. 4 helicopters are flying over my head right now in succession. There's the 4th one coming right now. Despite the number of helicopters over the city, some residents aren't bothered by the noise. A few blocks east, David Romero is pushing his daughter in a stroller. He says that noise is a part of living in Manhattan, and people who don't like it can live somewhere else. His baby is taking a nap and sleeps right through our interview.
Yeah, I got my baby right here. She falls asleep so easily outside. It's like all the noise of the city become a white noise. It's kind of like a form of a music, if you see it that way.
Council member Amanda Farias' bill prohibiting loud, non-essential helicopters is expected to pass. In the meantime, a flight tracker shows 8 helicopters in the air around Manhattan. Una Milliken, Columbia Radio News.
Next up, we hear a commentary from Carolyn McCarthy about how her grandfather's 90th birthday party taught her a new definition of success.
My grandpa's name was John Andrew Keenan, and he really loved Mr. Goodbars, the Hershey chocolate bars with half peanuts mixed in. We gave them out as favors at his 90th birthday party. My auntie printed out new labels so that the yellow wrapper said Mr. Good Guy instead. I'll never look at a Mr. Goodbar without thinking of that. I was 17 at his 90th birthday party. I remember driving down to his retirement community in Whiting, New Jersey, the car packed to the brim with presents, Mylar balloons, and birthday cake. All of my aunts and uncles and cousins were in the backyard, excited to celebrate him. We gathered around to give him his presents, an established in 1928 baseball hat, a poster with all of the major events of his birth year, photo albums of the family. He took the hat and put it on backwards when my mom tried to take his picture, throwing up a peace sign and posing for the camera. He held back tears at the poster and family photos. I think it brought up something for him, maybe about mortality. 90 was no small feat, even for him who most people thought was much younger. I mean, he learned Dutch at 80, rode his bike every day, and took computer classes so he would never fall out of touch. He always had a trip book, had a Manhattan every afternoon at 5, and always made people laugh. He even used to zip-tie laminated posters with jokes far too inappropriate for me to repeat here on the tree in front of his house, so much so that the community association repeatedly asked him to take them down. But looking at the photos, he started talking about his life, and really life in general. He told a story of one of his friends years ago asking him if he felt he was a success. He said he didn't really know what the word even meant. How could you possibly define something like that? So he looked it up in the dictionary. He told us when he saw the definition, he thought, I'm not going to make the cut. And everyone laughed. My grandpa never invented anything or held political office or sought out any notoriety, but he was the hardest worker. He loved his family and worked hard to provide for them. He was just a really good guy. He told us, I have a wife, I have children, I have grandchildren. They talk to me, they welcome me into their homes. So he can keep his definition. I'll keep what I have. My grandpa passed 3 years later, but I still think about his speech a lot. It's so easy for me to get caught up in what I think makes someone successful, a career, where they live, the degree they have. About a year ago, I told my boyfriend that if I didn't have the job I wanted by 25, I'd never be a successful journalist. Like, what? That doesn't even make sense. Success is so subjective. Who's to say whose opinion is correct? The Oxford Dictionary defines success as the accomplishment of an aim or purpose, the attainment of fame, wealth, or social status. John Andrew Keenan defined it to me as who shows up to your 90th birthday party. So Oxford can keep their definition. I'll keep what I have.
Success might not escape me, but I got something better. Look around you. This is better.
To hear a full version of Mr. Keenan's speech, visit uptownradio.org. That's all for this edition of Uptown Radio. We hope you enjoyed the show. Our leader today was executive producer Madeline Riley. Leading our staff of reporters was senior producer Carolyn McCarthy. Special thanks to our senior editor Hannah Weaver and assistant editor Maud Yish. Director Dana Bingfett coordinated with our studio production was Flora Warshaw. Thanks to our newscaster Joya Ma and our day reporters Hannah Lorenzo and Una Milliken. Our instructors, Sally Herships, Ben Shapiro, and Priscilla Alabi, advise our staff. I'm your host, CJ Yan. Uptown Radio is live on Thursdays at 4, and anytime at uptownradio.org. From all of us here at Uptown Radio, thanks for listening.